So we're here today on RealAgriculture.com. We're with Richard Phillips. He is the Executive Director of the Grain Growers of Canada. Welcome today, Richard.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
Okay, Richard, we're going to talk about the proposed changes this week to the CWB election process. Where exactly is that at?
Right now, the government has introduced an act into Parliament, and so the actual legislation, the proposed changes are there. There's actually two pieces to the act. The first piece deals with creating a minimum threshold of grain production for you to be eligible to vote in the Canadian Wheat Board elections, and the second piece is speeding up the process by which interim payments are sent out to farmers, final payments are sent out to farmers. It's going to greatly shorten up that from the time the Wheat Board indicates they have extra money available now to give to farmers. It'll greatly speed up farmers getting the cash in their hand. So there's two parts to the bill.
So, Richard, I guess what I'm reading in the news is that this appears to be somewhat of a debatable situation. There's obviously two sides. From the grain growers' perspective, what is your sort of feeling on the possible changes to this election process?
Well, I think what we want to see is we want to see credible elections. And to us, a credible election would be actual farmers or people who actually sell grain being the people who vote to determine the future of whatever marketing system they want. And whether they're for marketing choice or whether they're for the monopolies remaining. It's important to us that the actual people who have skin in the game be the people that vote.
So what do we have now? Like when you say that, what do we have now?
Right now, there is no requirement to have any grain deliveries at all. If you are listed in a permit book in any way, shape, or form, you could be the banker, you could be a person holding a mortgage. There's all kinds of people out there. If a quarter of land was left to, say, a number of siblings, and then it's rented out, those names could all very well be in the permit book as well. So there's a whole bunch of people who are not actively engaged in agriculture, who currently are getting ballots. And so what this requirement is it says you must have produced 40 tons of grain. One of the 7 major grains is listed in the Canada Grains Act. Those 7 major grains, 40 tons in any one of the previous 2 full crop years or the current year the election is held, which is in December. So at any time within the 3 previous crops, you had to have had 40 tons of grain either produced or given to you in crop share.
Okay, so what I'm trying to figure out here, though, is so we're trying to change it so that people that are actually, have skin in the game, so to speak, or people that are actually growing crops are able to vote on the elections. What is the argument against it? Like, to me, that just sort of makes sense. What is the argument against allowing this to happen?
Well, I think a lot of people are politically motivated in opposition here, and they're simply viewing this as an attack on the Canadian Wheat Board, even though the Wheat Board itself was involved in the studies that originally come up with this 40-ton number, and they're viewing this as a chance to simply try to embarrass the government, try to make their own political points, so on and so forth. They are also raising issues like, for example, well, why would canola people vote on the future of the Wheat Board? But, of course, being incredibly short-sighted, they don't realize you can't grow canola 3 years in a row. People always grow cereal grains in the rotations with the canola. So the fact is that even if somebody grows canola last year, they were probably growing a cereal grain 2 years before, or they're growing a cereal grain this year. So I don't know of any farmers hardly who would not grow either some wheat or barley as part of a normal crop rotation. So the reality is all those people should get a vote. And in fact, the Canadian Wheat Board Act gives the Wheat Board control over those 7 major grains. And so arguably, if the Wheat Board has control over them, they should get a ballot.
Oh, okay. So you mentioned the board was involved in some of a study or some of the studies on this. What is the board saying to this point on this issue?
Well, the board did vote in favor of supporting this, the 40-ton minimum, and I think what the position, as I understand from the Canadian Wheat Board, is that they too felt there needs to be a credible election process, and then if pro-Wheat Board people win all the elections, then the farmers have spoken, and then people should be expected to abide by that.
So in your mind, what's kind of brought this to a head? Was it the whole barley vote, where there was accusations that there was dead people voting, and people that hadn't been farming for 20 years? Like, is that kind of brought this to a head, or what's bringing this to reality?
Well, I think you have the legislation today, but if you were to go back a few years, the actual review panel that was put together and included what happened is the Canadian Wheat Board selected a number of names who they thought would be good people to be in the panel. The Liberal government of the day selected 3 of the 5 names the Wheat Board presented. They then hired their recently retired Chief Electoral Officer of Saskatchewan to be a special advisor to these 3 farmers on proper electoral procedure. And then they went out and held hearings across Western Canada. This was in about 2005. And it was that had been at least about 10 years roughly since the Wheat Board Act had been put in place. And it was just felt that there needed to be a review and an updating to see is everything working the way it should be. And what that panel heard loudly and clearly from all kinds of people, both pro-choice and pro-Wheat Board, was that there's too many non-farmers voting. So that panel put their heads together, and that's what they came up with. They came up with a minimum amount of grain that should be produced for you to get a ballot. So that's where it actually goes back to the Liberal government did that study, and the Conservatives have looked at that. They were doing some other things on the Wheat Board file, but this is what they've settled on. This is what's in front of the Parliament today, and this is what I think a lot of us who want to see a credible, clean election process in place, this is what we want to see happen.
So what kind of timeline can farmers expect on a decision on this? Are we talking about we'll know by the end of spring? This is a 5-year thing. What is the timeline in your mind?
Well, in an ideal world, if there's unanimity and the opposition parties were to respect the wishes of the vast majority of farmers out here, this could go through very quickly. The reality is, I'm not sure that'll happen. I think we'll find that some of the opposition parties indeed want to use this bill as a chance to do some grandstanding, again, on Canadian Wheat Board issues. So we think it'll probably most likely come in the fall. They'll look at it here in the spring, and then they'll probably be holding hearings in the fall, and possibly it'll be passed by Christmas and then in place for the set of director elections after that.
Okay. Well, Richard, thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll, I'm sure, talk to you again shortly in the future.
Good. Thanks very much, Sean.